Welcome to the Karuna Life, the podcast where we explore the connection between spirituality and everyday life. I'm Gina Kitzmiller. I'm a professional intuitive, a Reiki master teacher, and a longtime spiritual seeker. Join me as we dive into topics like living a heart-centered life, connecting with our intuition, and unleashing our own power. We'll discuss the metaphysical world, spirit guides, and finding magic in the ordinary. Get ready to embrace your inner mystic and explore the realms of the unseen. Welcome to the Karuna Life. I'm Gina Kitzmiller, and I'm really excited because today joining me is Kelly Baker of Living in Your Success. Kelly is an Akashic Records Consultant, a medium, and a certified Reiki Healer. And I asked her to come on today to talk about mediumship and her experiences around mediumship. And I know it's going to be a really interesting conversation. So, Kelly, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I think this is going to be a really good conversation. Though, to start, Kelly, can you tell me a little bit about how you define mediumship?
Yeah. So for me, mediumship is the ability to connect and communicate messages from spirits in the spiritual realm. And that can include past loved ones or spirit guides too. I've even had spirit guides come through. So it's a bridge, and in my mind, it's a bridge between this physical realm and the spiritual realm. And then mediums can use their intuitive senses, which everyone has, by the way. It's not just special to mediums. And that can come through as pictures and images in your mind. It can come through as hearing words and phrases or songs, or maybe just feeling through an emotion or feeling in your body. And then we take that and relay those messages to offer healing and clarity and validation for those seeking that connection. So to me, it's a bigger or really a deeper understanding that a soul can continue beyond this physical life and bridging that communication.
I love that. That's beautiful. It's a beautiful analogy. I absolutely agree. I think in terms of mediumship, what you do, because I obviously in my work I talk to
Yeah.
people's loved ones, but it's different than mediumship because I find that I may be able to bring a message through because I often read the emotion.
Mhm.
And yet I've had a session with you. You bring like details about the person, about memories they might have with this person. So I feel like mediumship is a little bit different, almost like if there was a dial, it's just like a little bit of a different knob on the dial. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, because it's kind of like a radio and like tuning in, and you have to go to like a different channel
Mhm.
to bring it in, because there are other ways that I work, like with the Akashic Records. I might tune in differently when I'm bringing in messages through the Akashic Records versus when I'm speaking with a past loved one that's
Mhm.
connected with me. And they also communicate with me very differently than when I'm in the records too, which is interesting.
That is really interesting.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. So when you started mediumship, can you tell me what was the hardest part about starting?
So one of the hardest parts, I think, is knowing where to start. You know,
Mhm.
I think for me, there's so much information out there, and there's so many people that do it differently just based on how they receive information, because each medium is different. Some may see, some may hear, some may feel or even smell. And so it's knowing where to start. And when you do start receiving those messages too, and hearing and speaking with spirit, you also have to determine how to decipher those messages too. So when you get those clues, it's like, okay, I'm seeing a picture of a book and the title of the book says this. What does that mean? What are they trying to tell me with this? And so that's one hard part, is figuring out how to get started with it, knowing that you have the ability to hear and speak with them, but then where do you take that and go? So that was something that I really had to dive into on my journey. But the other hard part, aside from the building that foundation around it and being able to practice with it, is setting boundaries with spirit too. Because once you open up and open that channel, it's kind of like, I call it the bat signal that goes out, right? And so your bat signal goes out in the sky and they can see that. And they're like,
Mhm.
she can hear us and see us and speak with us. We're going to go find her. And then they always want to reach out and talk. And it's not in a negative way, but it's just knowing that if you're going to the grocery store or taking a trip or going out to dinner with friends, just knowing how to set those boundaries and close down and open up so you don't have all of those emotions going around as well. Opening and closing down properly is really important. And also just making sure, I think the other thing is too, now that I'm thinking of this, is knowing what emotions are yours and what emotions are not yours, because that feeling that spirit will put inside of you when they're sharing a message with you, sometimes you might feel a certain way that is not your own,
Mhm.
and that could also be spirit speaking with you too. So I think it's like two sides of the coin. You
Mhm.
have that side of like learning and developing, and then you have that side of, okay, now I'm working with spirit and let me set some boundaries here so I know what's mine and what's not mine.
That makes sense. Yes, and I agree. I often do like kind of a closed or like I set an appointment sometimes with
Yes.
spirits to come back, and it sounds odd, but it does actually work. If I say
Yeah.
I'm not available right now, but I'll schedule you tomorrow at 11 a.m. and
Yeah.
I'll set the time to be in meditation. So, but I do think it can be overwhelming. For me, I remember when I first started really getting information, I found the grocery store just completely overwhelming. There was so many like different energies there that it was really hard when I first started to kind of learn how do you shut it down. And now my friends will kind of joke, they'll say, like, "Are you getting anything if we're just, out?" And I'll say, "Well, no, because I've kind of shut it off. I'm
Yeah.
not like on duty, so to speak. I'm like kind of just in my regular life. I'm not tuning in and trying to sense it." But I think often when you're new, you're also curious. My guides would say I would leave the door open because I kind of wanted to see what was going on, even though I would say I was closed.
Right, right. And I started figuring out, for me, what works is having like a convenience store image in my mind where I have an open and close sign. So after I finish with a reading, I will flip the sign open to close and turn the lights off in the store and lock the door. I open it back up. And sometimes if I've been moving from one thing to another, I might forget to close down, and then I might be washing dishes in the house and feel like a presence behind me.
Mhm.
Um, and not in a scary way, but just like, hello, I'm still here, ready to chat. And I'm like, oh, okay, I forgot to, close down. And it's like you mentioned with the grocery store, it's just you start to feel them around you, but
Yes.
do the same thing at the grocery store.
I like that image that actually, and I think that's funny because I could see them being like, "She's so nice. I just would like to continue our conversation." Do you ever have someone's loved one, if they really didn't, like, they didn't get a message to them that they felt was really important, like come back to you after the session and say, "Hey, can you please contact Susie and give her this message from me?" Or is it kind of like once we're done here, we're done, and they don't have like the ability or the option to come back around?
I did have that recently. I had a message that came through and I delivered it, and it was around their passing and how that happened and how they felt about it. And the way that it was delivered, was fine. I didn't hear anything after the way I delivered it. And even the person sitting across from me felt like, okay, that resonates and I
Mhm.
feel better about knowing that. But then later that evening, I went to bed and I heard they were still there. They came because sometimes even if you close down, if they're really strong energy,
Mhm.
they can stay around and you have to ask them to, leave, but in a friendly way. But they said, hey, I really don't think I shared the best way for you to clarify this for her. And if we could, I would also like her to know this. And so I was like, okay. So I did reach out to back out to that person and let them know, like, hey, when we were talking about this in our reading, they wanted me to also let you know this. And they told me this last night. So it was almost like spirit was like, and one more thing.
Yeah, it sounds like a PS. Okay, that's interesting. On that note, have you ever had any experiences that you were like uncomfortable with or negative energy that you felt like you didn't want to talk to that was kind of coming along for the ride or was in the reading with someone?
Yeah. You know, I have not experienced anything negative around like when I'm doing a reading for someone. Not yet, at least, but I do know personally for me, when I wasn't in a reading, I did have somebody that passed that lived next door to me. And I did not know that they had passed in their home. And so before that happened, I was trying to go to bed every night, and they were very adamant about wanting to show themselves to me and like stay in my room, stay at the end of my bed, watch me while I was sleeping. I guess felt that like feeling, but it was more like urgency. It was very adamant about letting me know, but the message wasn't clear enough for me to know because I hadn't known them very well as my neighbor. I had just moved in. And so I did not know what they were truly trying to tell me. So I think that was the only time that I remember it feeling scary to me because they were putting a feeling of panic in me because they were upset that nobody had known that they were there because they lived alone.
That makes sense. That's an interesting story.
Mhm.
Okay, and
Yeah.
they probably were like, "You have the bat signal that's gone out." And they're like, she's like
Yes.
right next to me. I can just like hop over and I can get this message to her." But yes, I can see where that would be.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that sounds actually kind of a little scary. I don't know that I would want to wake up
I know. It was,
with someone hovering over the bed. Yeah.
yeah. I was so anxious, like going to bed, and I could just feel like such a strong presence of like, you have to do this. You have to do this. And I was like, I don't know why I'm feeling like this right now. Like it's kind of hard to go to sleep like this. And so now I know that's what it was. But personally, in readings, I have not gotten that yet.
Have you found anything that's surprising when you talk to loved ones in spirit that like you didn't expect or like kind of coming into it that you were like, "Oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that."
I would say the one surprising thing when I was younger and I had experience with spirit at such a young age, and I've been around it all my life, there isn't anything that's too surprising for me because I have been in tune with it and the energy when I can feel it around. Because I've been able to see and speak with spirit since I was about 5 years old, is when I had my first interaction with it in the middle of the night in my bedroom and I didn't know what it was. I'm less scared now than I was before. And it took me time. So I think the surprising part was the progression of it over from my younger years to now and realizing that it's not something to be scared of. They're not here to hurt you or scare you. They just really want to talk. And in the spirit realm, there's no such thing as time or space. So when it's in the middle of the night, and they're ready to chat, it's because you're so relaxed in that state of mind. You've come down from all of the stress of the day. And so that's where when things start to get active. But when you're a young girl, you're trying to go to bed at night and sleep, it's scary in your room when you're starting to feel those things in the middle of the night. As an adult, I think I was pleasantly surprised with how calm and aware I feel now with them around me because I'm more like, "Oh, hi," instead of being freaked out. Like usually I would talk to my mom about it and, not want to sleep in my room. But
Mhm.
now if my dog is like staring at the corner of the room or I feel a presence come in, I'm like, "Oh, hi there."
Let me see if the convenience store is open.
Yeah.
No, that does make sense though with the mental chatter. And I think the veil's thinner. Oftentimes, like that's why I like to meditate early in the morning. And it's really before even the sun comes up because I notice that you can just sense the chatter really starting as people awaken and things start moving. So How does your mom think about your job? Let me ask that. So what was her, does she know that you talked to spirit when you were younger? And how did she take that? Because that seems like that might be difficult for some parents.
Yeah, I'm biased, but I am so thankful for my mom and her support because from the moment that I told her that these things were happening to me, she, first of all, listened and asked questions and made me feel safe. The first thing she always told me is, okay, tell me a little bit more about that. And what did they look like? And okay, they're not here to scare you. And then she gave me some things that I can do when I would feel scared. Like you can tell them to please leave or go away. And what I realize now is that when I was younger, I just looked at it as I can tell my mom about this and how I'm feeling because she always listens to me. That's how I felt as a little girl. But as I got older, I realized that my great grandmother actually had these abilities. And she told me that she grew up knowing her grandmother had these abilities. And then as she grew up, she has a gift of premonition where she'll have dreams or visions before they happen, like days or months before. And so I think because she had that and she was also into learning about the spiritual world, she was open to um, supporting that for me. And she would always openly talk with me about it. She
I love
loves
that.
that I do this now. Oh my gosh, she bought me books when I was in high school to read about. Like if she was at the bookstore or the library, she'd be like, I picked up this book for you to read. I think it'd be good. We would go on girls' trips, like across state, and we'd go to like mediums together. Once I got older, and then we would share our stories in the car on the ride back. And yeah, so now she is just like loves to hear about how this journey is going and talks to me all the time about it.
Oh my gosh, I love that. There's a lot of heart energy when you talk about her. You can
Oh,
almost see that she was like kind of here to be a coach, so to speak, and to help guide you, which is beautiful.
yeah.
I think there's a lot of really old souls coming in, and those who are very sensitive. That this comes up for me with clients oftentimes, where they have ones, particularly around middle school age. It seems to be where they're starting to have kind of, I would say, like an increase in instances where they're seeing things, hearing things, which can be, scary for a child. So,
Mhm,
what advice would you have for parents who are dealing with either more sensitive kids or ones who may be having experiences like you had as a child?
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I love this question because having been a teacher as well and working with kids, I think it's important to always make sure that they're being heard, that making them feel like they're being heard. And I think that was the biggest thing for me is that I never felt shut down. My mom, if I told her something that I dreamt about or that I felt in my room, she would always, tell me that she, understood. She would ask me questions instead of saying, oh, it's nothing to worry about, or you didn't see that, or you're being silly. She would always open the floor for me to talk and have conversations. I think with younger kids too, it's, and this is just my opinion, but I think it's good for them to have them draw pictures of what they see or what they saw and their emotions and how they're feeling, and then explain with those pictures. And then I think for those who are a little bit older, like in middle school and how you get towards that high school age, having them, read books about it too, and having open conversations a little bit more with them. I think for me, it was scary. It really was. And I didn't like it and I wanted to push it aside. And having my mom remind me that I have the power to say, I am not open. Please leave. I'm not here to talk. I think because she educated herself on it and she read books about it, that she knew what to say to me. And so I used those strategies. I would say, you know, please leave, or I would let them know that I'm not available. Even in middle school, I would do that.
I love
And
that.
I just want to elaborate a little bit more because I also went to friends' homes. I also went to sleepovers. I went to summer camps. And when you think about it, as a child, you know that you can't talk about it to anyone. And so it's hard because you might feel things or see things in other people's homes or places that you're in. And it can be very isolating because their parents don't know about it or the people that you're working at the camp don't know about it. And so for my mom, she would always say, you can call me whenever you need me. And here are 3 things that you're going to do when you're there and to help you if this happens to you while you're there. And it would kind of be like our little secret, you know, so I wouldn't feel alone and I would have those strategies.
The image I had was almost like teaching like little ones, like if your friend comes over to play or a neighbor comes over to play and you don't want to, you can just say no, but like holding the power, but keeping it very light. Oh, so it's not scary.
Yeah.
It's just very easy. Just like I would tell you, if a neighbor comes over and you don't want to play with the little boy down the street, you say, no, thank you. I don't want to play right now. And you shut the
Yeah.
door. So there's a real lightness to it that doesn't feel super heavy. I know that with my kids growing up, obviously they were kind of used to like what I do. I would give them crystals often. And so they would know if they were going places, I'd give them black tourmaline. I think I like, would have a bracelet or even a necklace if they felt like that kind of helped ground their energy or feel like they
Yeah.
needed a little extra protection. But I think your mom sounds like she did it in such just kind of there's a lightness to it where it's not I probably made it a little too serious because I was like, kind of worried, for them. But it sounds like your mom was just very matter of fact, kind of like, let's keep it moving. You feel heard, but yet, and we have these things in place right, so that you didn't feel like any sort of, I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for, like a real fear around it. So she kind of
Yeah.
normalized it, I think, which is really interesting and not very common for a lot of parents, I would guess.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's a perfect way to put it. That's how exactly how I felt. I felt normalized. I felt like because you already feel different because you realize that other people aren't experiencing the same thing. And if I could sum up in one word what she did for me, she normalized it for me because she would read these books, like by Sylvia Brown was one of my favorite authors. And she would say, I read in Sylvia Brown's book that this is what happens when you experience this. And next time when this happens to you, maybe you could do this. And so for her to educate herself to help me like work through what I was experiencing, and then also to know that she's reading a book where this happened to someone else made me feel so less alone. And also I love that you did this with your kids and you gave them crystals. I just think that's awesome.
Well,
Love
my daughter laughs and says that sage is the smell of her childhood.
it.
But I do think that we're gonna be seeing more and more. I can see it with, like, the new babies coming in, what parents are telling me about their children. You were probably, like, on the forefront, and there's this kind of big wave following behind that. It's gonna be a topic that's gonna be needed to be discussed as, we become more and more aware of the world of spirit and of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. I think I started to get downloads of that like around 2020. And children being born now and even in the next couple years are going to be at such an advanced level spiritually that they're going to help us and we're going to learn so much from them and they're going to have so many gifts. And I think we are definitely seeing a lot of that now.
I agree with that too.
Mhm.
And those babies that I've known that have been born in the last couple of years, I call them the powerhouses because you can feel even when someone's pregnant or like knowing that this child's going to be coming in, like they are here and they are ready to play. And it's like this really like get me in the game, like I want to go. And so it's really interesting to kind of feel into the energy of
Yeah.
the new little ones coming in. But yes, I kind of say the big players are coming in at
Yeah,
this time for sure.
for sure. Yeah, I agree.
So I was going to ask you, what question or what do you think our loved ones in spirit like most often want us to know? Like, is there a theme or is there something that really seems to come through in sessions with clients?
I love this question so much. This is probably one of my favorite questions because the biggest thing that I get that I hear all the time from spirit is how they want us to be happy they are so proud of us and they can hear us all the time. And when we talk to them. So I always say sometimes the unfair part is that they can see and hear us, but we can't see and hear them all the time. But the way that we can communicate with them or know that they're communicating with us is through these signs and synchronicities. And I'll give an example. I lost a loved one recently, and this is another thing too that I always love to talk about is how soon can we hear from a past loved one after they've moved over and transitioned? And I had a loved one recently pass over, my grandmother, and I talk to her all the time. I've been talking to her all the time, and I know that she can hear me because I said to her, send me a sign if you've made it and you're okay. And she always used to sing the song, You Are My Sunshine, My Only Sunshine. And that I was opening up my phone and I went straight into the Instagram app the other day. And the first video that came up was a little girl with a microphone singing that song. And it like just was everything I needed. And it just affirms that they can hear us. And that is the biggest thing I always tell everyone is they want you to be happy. They are so proud of you and that we can hear you. I think it's so powerful, so powerful to talk with them all the time because it's so healing for us. And it actually bridges and creates that energy to become so much stronger with them too.
Yes, I absolutely couldn't have said it any better, Kelly. I absolutely agree. And as you know, like I love signs and synchronicities. And Kelly actually talked to my husband who was in spirit when we had a session. And I talk with him as well. And that you summed up, those are the three messages that I get from him on a regular basis. And when we talk about, at least in my opinion, that there is time is, linear for humans, it's not linear for those in spirit.
Yeah.
That it never made sense to me when you would hear people say they have so many days before they can come forward, or even worse, it depends on how they passed,
Yeah.
that will determine when they're able to come forward. And that just isn't my experience. I talked to someone's husband who passed away recently as well, who came forward for her. To me, that feels very dualistic when we start to put very human concepts and boundaries around, well, it has to be this. And I think a lot of the misperceptions can be very hurtful. I think there was one thing someone told me years ago that if a loved one passed by suicide, they were on like a gag order for 5 years. Well, you can imagine if you tell someone who's grieving the loss of a loved one that they're not able to interact or talk with you for X amount of time, how incredibly isolating and hurtful that is. So I think some of these old stories or things that have been passed down that are just untruths, I'm really hoping are going to start to fall to the wayside as we have people like you that come forward to say, that's not actually accurate. And here's actually what those in spirit would like for us or would like for you to know. Mhm.
Absolutely. I could not agree more because there's so many factors that play into the time it takes for that spirit to come in to speak with you. And I was just talking with somebody this past weekend about if somebody were to choose to leave this earth on their own. It does make me sad when people say like, "Oh, they're in this place and they have to wait because this is what they did and they chose to take themselves out of this world before it was their time." And that's just not true. You know, there's so much love over there and so much peace. And it's just, they might have things that they're working through, and it might take time for their loved one here through that grieving process to build that energy to connect. But that doesn't mean that there is a certain amount of time you have to wait. It could be a week, it could be 6 months, it could be 3 weeks. Everyone's different.
Mhm.
And
I
everyone's
agree.
experience is different.
I agree. And I think everyone's in spirit, everyone's energy is different. And so
Yeah.
sometimes if it's a very strong spiritual energy, I think that they are able to come through.
Yeah.
For myself, I know that in talking with my husband, I did get messages from him immediately. It was the next day, but then it was like kind of quiet. And then there'd be like little bits and pieces. And I found as I went through the grief process for myself, it
Mm.
was probably around 6 months that I felt like, that heaviness of the grief was starting to slowly lift a little bit, and I was getting little rays of sunshine, and then that was when I started to really be able to very clearly sit down and have a conversation and feel like I was getting the response back, and I kind of felt for me that it was that the grief kind of cloud needed to lift a little bit.
Yeah.
But I absolutely agree. I think that when we talk to our loved ones in spirit, it's very much like a phone call, and the more that we talk with them, the more we strengthen that bond of connection, that it's just easier to pick up the phone to call them because you do it on the regular basis. And that's the way my guides often show it to me. And if I complain sometimes, like I want to talk to someone, they'll say, well, did you pick up the phone and actually call them? Or am I kind of waiting for them? They're saying, be intentional. Who is it you're trying to talk to? If it's your grandfather, pick up the phone and talk to him,
Yeah.
and be intentional about it. And that's the other piece that I think people often don't think about. We kind of toss out a very blanket statement of like, my loved ones in spirit. And that's kind of, it's good. But I think that if your heart really wants to speak to someone in particular, then you want to dial them up, so to speak,
Yeah.
and talk with them directly.
Right. And to the flip side of that too, my grandfather has been with me my whole life. He was the first spirit that I connected with. And then I didn't feel him for like this past month at all. And I even said to my mom, like sometimes we feel spirits so strongly and receive those signs and we know what they feel like when they're around us, and or maybe we smell a certain scent. Like I know he used to smoke, so sometimes I get a scent of smoke and I didn't feel him. And I asked him, why am I not feeling you? And I even asked another friend of mine who is a medium as well. And they said, well, he's been a little busy, Kelly. Because he's trying to prepare everything for my grandmother's transitioned when she had passed over. And so it can be the flip side too, where somebody's like, "Oh my gosh, I was getting all these signs from my loved one and now I'm not getting them. Are they not around me anymore? Like they're gone now." And that's not true either. Sometimes they're just in different places preparing things or working on things with other loved ones.
I agree. And I feel that as well too. And I think sometimes that in terms of even just your intuitive ability, sometimes you
Mhm.
have periods where it's very on and you're getting, it's thing after one after another. And then there's other times where it gets very quiet. And
Yeah.
what I'm kind of learning and I've heard from a few different people now is that sometimes that is where you're in that quiet period. It's actually kind of an upgrade going on. There might be things going on behind the scenes that you're not aware of energetically in the energy body, so
Yeah.
that things may seem very quiet and then there's going to be the uptick. Everything kind of goes in flow. I think for most of us, and I don't know if you would agree, it's not like a straight shot up. It's kind of up and then up and then down. And especially in the beginning, it can get quiet for what seems like a few months on end. And that can be kind of disconcerting where you're like, wait, what's happening? I was, getting all these messages and now it's quiet. But then I
Yeah.
feel like as I've grown, I either just kind of know that you'll naturally have some of those dips and I don't really worry so much. But when you're new, you're afraid you've lost it, so to speak, and
Yes.
that it may not be coming back. And so it's kind of learning to just be at peace and knowing that, like, yes, it might be a little bit quiet for this period. There's usually a reason. We may not know why, but then when you're ready, it'll start to dial back up again.
Yeah. Gosh, I resonate with that so much because I didn't know that was happening to me before. And now I know that it is. And it's like the ebbs and flows, like you're explaining. And in December, it got really, really quiet and I didn't understand why. And then it really ticked up in January and February. So for me, now I know when it starts to get quiet, I'm like, oh, it's gonna start to really pick up now. And
Mhm.
sometimes the reason why is because we need time to rest too and our energy, especially if they know that we're about to get like a bunch of downloads for whatever reason that may be for us in our life and
I
coming.
absolutely agree with that. And I think too, sometimes they're working on the energy body because you have to be
Yeah.
able to like assimilate the energy and the vibration and the frequencies. Your vibration needs to be able to match it. I think often at night, there's things that are going on energetically as they're kind of making shifts to the energy body so that you are able to hold those higher frequencies or on that radio dial, be able to hit another station
Yep.
and then be able to anchor in that frequency as well. So it's interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
I love it. Well, you and I could probably chat forever, but I want to be
No.
respectful of your time. So So in conclusion, where can people find you, Kelly, and your work?
So people can find me on Instagram. I have a page called Kelly at Living in Your Success. And through that page, I have a website link that you can go to as well for each of my offerings. So I love to use Instagram and the social media page to really connect with my audience and build a community there. I love my community. It's amazing. I often share a lot of different topics that people are thinking about, whether it's around energy, whether it's around our spirit guides, um, universal signs, and then also topics around our past loved ones. And a lot of my topics I get from questions that my community has. And then I, create information about those topics to share out to everyone. But through that, I have a link in my bio that people can go to my website. And what they can do is I have an Akashic record sessions I offer. I have a mediumship sessions that I offer with clients to connect with past loved ones. And I also do Reiki distance and in-person Reiki. So that is the best way to find me.
Great. And I will put that in the show notes as well so that
Yeah.
people will know where to find you. And Kelly's energy is just beautiful. She's just, we need more of that on social media for sure. So I would highly recommend her and her work. And it has been such a joy to talk to you today, Kelly. It was just as lovely as I knew it would be. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thanks, Gina. This is such an honor to be on here and to talk about this. I could talk about this all day because I just love talking with spirit. But the biggest piece for me is that what I get joy out of is connecting those with their loved ones and bridging that connection so they get to feel that energy again. So
I love
thank you.
that. It's here. So I asked my guides what they would like for everyone to know today as we wrap up this episode on mediumship. And what they're telling me is they would really love for everyone to kind of give themselves a permission slip to begin to talk to their loved ones in spirit. And they're saying that for far too long, we've kind of given our power away, so to speak, or expected that this has to come from a certain individual. And as the collective changes, as consciousness rises, more and more people are going to not only be talking to their loved ones in spirit, but to be actively receiving signs, synchronicities, and responses back from them. And so they would encourage everyone to begin to lean into this a little bit more, to begin to play with it, to see how this is able to fit into your life in a way that feels good to you. Of course, it's always helpful to talk with an intuitive or a medium. I understand that as well. Sometimes it's nice to have those validations. And yet they're also encouraging us to not forget to pick up the phone. They're saying, who is it that your heart is asking to call? That's usually a pretty good indicator that your loved one is asking for you to directly reach out to them so that they can begin to really strengthen that connection and have those conversations with you in spirit. I hope that that helps. I really enjoyed this episode with Kelly. If you liked this episode, please consider leaving us 5 stars. And if there's some topics that you would like for us to cover in the future, please let us know by emailing Gina at thekarunalife.com. Have a great rest of your day.